This episode was brought to you by Shudder.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Cyberpunk 2077, the most hyped video game I've ever seen. The hype for this game would have you believe that it was going to change gaming forever. Even before anyone ever picked up the game, they were talking about how it was going to usher in an era of peace and progress for the human species and revolutionize our medical industry in the real world and give us wetter dreams. The hype for this game was an absolute curse for the final product. No matter what CD Projekt Red delivered, it could be the best video game ever made. It was still going to disappoint people who put these incredible, unrealistic expectations on it. But now that the game is finally out, the question begs to be asked, does it live up to the hype? Has gaming truly evolved? Have we entered this new, enlightened era for our species thanks to Cyberpunk 2077? God bless Cyberpunk 2077? The answer is no. This game never stood a chance at reaching those expectations, but that's not to say the game is bad. In fact, it's a good game. I'd even go as far as to call it a very good game. But there's a lot of problems with it, the biggest of course being its performance. I have to talk about that right away. This game is borderline unplayable on PlayStation 4 and just consoles in general. It barely gets above 20 FPS. The bugs are outrageous, not just goofy bugs, but actual game-breaking ones where missions will just not work and you'll have to go through hoops to try and make the game fucking function. It is a disaster in terms of its performance. It is the buggiest game I have ever played at launch, aside from something like the Culling 2, but that's not really fair because you can't call the Culling 2 a buggy game considering the only glitch that game had was the fact that nobody bought it so the games couldn't start. It wasn't really a performance thing, just no one wanted that piece of shit. But this game is absolutely disastrous with its performance. Even on PC, I encountered so many problems. Missions I couldn't start, NPCs that wouldn't spawn. I had to save, load multiple times and try tons of different ways of trying to make a single NPC spawn so I could start a side quest. I had to fucking set up a Rube Goldberg machine like, maybe if I set up my car to self-drive itself to me, and then I save load, and then hop in the car, maybe then the NPC will spawn. I just had to come up with all kinds of like theory-crafted scientific hypotheses to make the fucking NPC spawn to start some of these quests. It was really frustrating. There's a genuine problem with this game and its performance. It doesn't really run that well. Even on like the best settings on the best PC, you're still going to have FPS drops. You're still going to encounter so many glitches. It's crazy. I am actually shocked at the state that this game is in on launch. Now, that aside, let's actually talk about the game once you can actually play it. It's good. I do like it. I think the narrative is great. I think most of the characters are very well written and very interesting. I absolutely love the world. The universe here in Cyberpunk 2077 is not only visually breathtaking and one of the best looking games I've ever seen in terms of its graphics and its art style and just visuals in general, but it just feels alive. As you're exploring Night City, you're going to encounter a ton of different shit. People asking for help. You know, there's a dude out there who's burnt his dick trying to get a dick augmentation, so now you have to drive him to the clinic so he can repair his penis before it burns itself off. There's just so much to do, and there's just so many things to encounter and just explore in the world. It really does feel alive. It's not like you're just wandering around a barren wasteland with no one in it, nothing to do, and just putting fingers up your asshole as you wait for the next side quest or main quest. There's just tons of tiny things you can do around the world, and I really appreciate that. The universe, the world, it is absolutely 10 out of 10 in that department. Great. The game is beautiful to look at. The design choices are great. I love the aesthetic of the game. I can't talk enough about how much I enjoyed that. And to complement all of it, you have great soundtrack. Every fucking song in this game is a banger. It really is. I didn't hear a single song that came on that I was like, damn, that shit is stinky. It's not good. I was always like, fuck, turn that shit up. I don't care if I get DMCA'd on Twitch. That's a great fucking song right there. The soundtrack in this game is so good. The score is great. They crushed it in that department as well. But now, we're going to get on to some of the things that I think are a bit of a shortcoming for it, even aside from just the massive glaring problems with performance. I think the gunplay is super stiff. I think it's clunky. I think it feels like it's straight out of 2009. It is not the best gunplay. It's not tight. It's very floaty. I just didn't really find myself liking the gunplay that much. And the guns themselves I think are cool and pretty imaginative, but the main differences between guns are just stat changes. You'll get different categories of weapons, but it doesn't really change that much because every weapon kind of functions the same. And throughout my playthrough, I played on hard, and I never really encountered any times where I was like, damn, I need to mix and match my guns here to suit the enemies I'm facing. You basically just choose whatever gun has the highest damage output as just base DPS, instead of like, oh, I'm going up against robots, I should look for electrical damage elementals or anything. You never have to worry about that, you just choose whatever has the highest number like a fucking caveman. So I didn't like the gunplay, it didn't feel that great. There are a lot of options when approaching combat, such as hacking. You can scan enemies and quick hack them, which can do things like overheat them or turn off their eyesight for a second or make them forget they're in combat, which is all pretty cool, but it's just a novelty. It doesn't really do much to help you. It's kind of pointless, because in the time it takes to hack them, you could have just killed them with a gun or melee. I spent the majority of the game going through a melee build. I went for max coolness. There's a lot of perks and a lot of attribute points that you allocate in the game, and I went for the coolness category, which involves stealth and something called cold-blooded, which is passives that you stack up to give you other bonuses. I didn't really use stealth. Stealth was pretty boring, but the cold-blooded was pretty cool, and it worked really well with my melee build, so I went through the whole game just going absolutely just straight fucking wild on him. I had an electric baton and I just started one-shotting some of the big bosses towards the end and just bending cheeks over and putting both fists in their asshole. Melee build was pretty fucking great, and coupling my good weapons and good perks with good cyberware augments. Cyberware is another thing that you can be upgrading your character with, which is things that you'll find out in the world and from Ripper docs where you can add them to your character. That'll give you things like a double jump if you put that on your legs. It can give you other things like gorilla arms and monowire, all kinds of different things that kind of change the way your character plays. And I do like cyberware a lot. But when it comes to the actual perks, I think a lot of the perks are really uninspired. It's just flat percentage increases. There's a few that do change how some of the things function fundamentally, but for the most part, the perks that you're getting are just percentage increases, which is a little boring. I would have liked to see a little more creativity from some of the perks instead of just, hey, putting a point in here gives you 5% bonus damage with blunt weapons. I would have liked to just see a couple other things that would change it up a bit. But there's so many things you can put points into. I understand that would just be also unrealistic to ask of them, so it's not a huge complaint, just a little nitpick there. I do like how much there is that you can play around with. There's a lot of things you can find. You can upgrade your weapons through finding crafting materials in the world, going to vending machines, scrapping some soda cans, get some parts, upgrade your weapons. Like, you're going to be doing a lot of min-maxing if you care about a really great build and just being overpowered fucking badass, traveling the night city. There's a lot you can do to min-max, and I like that. But again, I still do feel like the actual gameplay with guns and even melee to a certain extent is just very stiff and a bit outdated. And you're going to encounter glitches when doing that. Oftentimes when running my melee build, I'd run into a glitch where I'd beat someone to death and just absolutely club the shit out of them, clobber them, give them the old whopperoonie, and then I can't sprint for the rest of the mission. I'd have to like force load a save in order to get the ability to sprint back, and it was just a real headache. Things that are out of your control and just bugs that really shouldn't be here. Also, sticking in terms of gameplay here, the AI is sometimes godlike in this omniscient super being that's able to know exactly where you are and just smell your farts from across the map and hunt you down like a rabid animal. They'll be shooting you through cover, curving bullets around the pillar that you're hiding behind, and just popping a full round in your dick hole without you even being able to see them. And then some other times, the AI is the dumbest shit you've ever seen in the world, where you have to wonder, is the game even working anymore? The AI will be looking right at you while you're crouched. You can be in front of them, touching their shins, giving them a back massage, and they won't be alerted to your presence. So the AI is just really inconsistent with its difficulty. Again, I stayed on hard the whole game, and it was never really that challenging to begin with. But sometimes you'd have moments where you're just getting one shot from someone that you never saw, and they're using like a fucking slingshot or like shooting spitballs out of a straw, and they're one-shotting you at full health. And then other times you can take 1,000,000 bullets because they're like stormtroopers and can't hit you, or they just don't even fucking see you because they're just standing there on patrol with their eyes closed. It was just all over the place with its difficulty. So the gameplay really is probably one of the weakest parts about the game, of course, putting aside performance issues. Now, let's talk about the length of the game, because I see that being a complaint for a lot of people. 8 years for only 15, 20 hours, ridiculous, shit like that. The main missions, I finished the game in roughly 30-ish hours in total, and I did quite a few side missions, but I'd say the main missions probably did take me around like 18 hours or something like that. And the main missions were very good. It's a lot of dialogue, and for a lot of people that's a big turnoff all of a sudden, or at least they pretend it is. I remember when everyone was losing their fucking minds over how perfect Red Dead Redemption 2 is, and I'd say that had far more scenes of just dialogue than this game has. So I don't know why that's a complaint all of a sudden, but keep in mind, yes, the main missions have a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of exposition, but I think it's all good. I think it's all well written. When it's not glitching out, because oftentimes during these fucking cutscenes and during the dialogue, you'll have people shouting a million lines at you because the dialogue's overlapping, so you have 9 conversations going when you're trying to get the fucking narrative fed to you, so you have no idea what's going on, so you have to reload in order to get the actual lines delivered at the right time, as opposed to 9 lines overlapping. So, but again, that's just another fucking bug in this game that happens way too often. When you're actually getting the narrative, though, I think it's good, it's well written, it's engaging, the story's good, the plot's nice, and the ending that I got, I thought it was a happy ending. I got a very happy ending, but it was a bit weak. There were a lot of things that were unresolved, and from what I saw of the other endings, none of the endings are all that great. Which isn't the biggest deal in the world, because the whole journey there is good, and I really liked it, especially Johnny Silverhand, and I see a lot of people calling out Keanu Reeves' acting, and admittedly, a lot of times it is flat. Like when he's supposed to be angry, he doesn't really sound angry, but it's Keanu Reeves, and I think it's still a very good performance for the most part, because it makes you care about the character. And I just like Keanu Reeves. I can't say anything fucking bad about Keanu Reeves. I still liked it. And Johnny Silverhand still is a cool character. But anyway, I keep getting off topic. The narrative is good. The main missions are good, but mostly dialogue. You will be just mainly experiencing dialogue when doing main missions. And yes, there is about 18 hours worth. The real meat of the game comes from the side quests and the side jobs and all the other missions that aren't with the main. This is where most of your character development is going to happen. This is where most of your bonding with the characters is going to happen. And this is also where some things can play into the ending. For example, I did a side quest line that allowed me to access some certain things in the ending that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I think the side missions are probably the best part of the game. I found those to be extremely high quality, very interesting, and really got me to understand more about this very interesting cast of characters. So I think the side quests are spectacular, and there's a lot more action in those. It isn't just shooting once every 30 minutes in between dialogue. There's a lot more going on in the side quest than I'd say go on in the main quest in terms of action and shit. But I don't think it's a short game. I don't know why people are criticizing it. There's so much content here. There's a lot of meat in here. And especially if you care about min-maxing, there's so many cyberware augments and perks that you're going to want to access and points you want to put in certain places. Like, there's a lot. There is a lot of juice in this juice box. So I don't know where everyone's saying 8 years for like no content. I don't know where that's coming from. They clearly haven't played it or didn't really care to, actually play most of it. They just beelined the main story and did it on easy mode, game journalist mode, because it is not a short game. It really isn't. And overall, I'd say it is a good game, but I wouldn't call this a great game. I enjoyed my time with it. I didn't have crazy expectations of it going in. This is right around what I was expecting, so I was happy. In fact, this is better than I was expecting, so I was pleasantly surprised, to be honest. So plugging Cyberpunk 2077 in the moist meter, I would be giving this game an 80%, but I genuinely just can't justify it being that high when it's in this broken of a state. So I'm going to have to give this game a 70 because there is actual game-breaking problems with it. It is borderline unplayable on some consoles. Like, that's not acceptable. They should have put this baby back in the oven and given it more time to cook. Should have marinated a bit longer to iron out the bugs. I know everyone hates delays and people fucking called in sick to work for a month just to play it, but they should have fucking delayed it again because there's a lot of glaring issues with this game. So I think a 70% is right in line with what it deserves in its current state. Hopefully all those problems will get solved down the line because I do think it is a good game that I do think a lot of people would like if they weren't getting so frustrated with all of the broken parts of it. So yeah, Halloween may be over, but that doesn't mean the horror has to stop there. Today I want to talk about a service called Shudder. Shudder is the largest collection of acclaimed horror movies and shows delivered right to your favorite devices, like the Netflix of horror. Shudder is a service that costs $5.99 a month or $56.99 for a year, and you get access to the largest curated selection of horror and thrilling series and movies. Now, most of you know I love horror movies, and I know of pretty much every single one of them. If a 15-year-old in a high school somewhere made a horror movie, I've probably seen it. But Shudder was actually able to throw me a few curveballs, and I actually found a few movies I'd never even heard of on the service. So it really does have an incredible collection of horror movies and series, and I really thought that was super impressive. Of course, watching the horror movies and series on Shudder is an ad-free experience, and it really does go to pretty much every device you could imagine. So if you want to get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content, Shudder's expertly curated collection of titles include Tigers Are Not Afraid, One Cut of the Dead, Revenge, and the Creepshow TV series, which is produced by Greg Nicotero, and based on the famous films by George Romero. So if you're interested, if you're a horror fan, you can try Shudder for free for 30 days by going to shudder.com and using promo code MOIST. That's SHUDDER.com using code MOIST for a free 30-day try. That's it. See ya.